Welcome to the Florida Civics Literacy Exam Preparation Workshop hosted by the Learning Commons. I'm Katie Toole. Today's workshop will be covering the principles and practices of democracy. This is mostly a discussion of terminology and definitions. The Florida Civics Literacy Exam covers 4 competencies. This session will cover Competency 1, understanding the basic principles and practices of American democracy and how they are applied in our Republican form of government. We will cover approximately 15 terms that you need to understand for the rest of the lectures to make sense and for you to have a good chance of passing the Florida Civics Literacy Exam. The first term we will discuss is the social contract. The social contract is the idea that we as citizens willingly give up some of our freedoms in order to experience the safety of community and governance. You may have heard the term, we live in a society. That's where this idea comes from. The idea of the consent of the governed is the idea that the only legitimate government is one in which the power is derived from the citizens. John Locke, the man portrayed in the picture, was an Enlightenment thinker who pioneered the ideas of natural law, the social contract, religious tolerance, and the right to revolution. His thinking proved essential in both the American Revolution and the U.S. Constitution. Checks and balances and the separation of powers. Separation of powers is the division of government into distinct branches to limit any one branch from exercising the core functions of the others. A system of checks and balances allows the different parts of government to have powers that affect and control the other parts so that no one part becomes more powerful. Limited government is a political system in which there are certain restrictions placed on the government to protect individual rights and liberties. James Madison, who was called the father of the Constitution, relied on Montesquieu's spirit of the law for ideas in the Constitution. Montesquieu, who is the gentleman pictured here, wanted a limited government with 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Due process is a requirement that legal matters be resolved according to established rules and principles, and that individuals be treated fairly. Due process applies to both civil and criminal matters. For the Florida Civics Literacy Exam, you should know and understand how the justice system works. There is more on due process in video 2 where we discuss the Constitution. The Constitution uses the words due process only twice. In the 5th Amendment, it says to the federal government that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, uses the same 11 words, called the Due Process Clause, to describe the legal obligation of all states. So the 5th Amendment is to the federal government. The 14th Amendment is particularly to the states. The ideas of due process are rooted in Magna Carta, which is discussed more in video 3, Other Founding Documents. Rule of law is a principle under which all persons, institutions, and entities are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, meaning everybody gets to know about them. 2, equally enforced, and we will talk about equal protection. 3, independently adjudicated by the judicial branch, not by those who passed them or those that have been offended by them. No one, individual or governmental branch, gets to be judge, jury, and executioner. This principle can also be defined as the restriction of the arbitrary exercise of power by subordinating it to well-defined and established laws. This is where we get the idea that no one is above the law. Equality under the law and equal protection. The government, not individuals, is required to treat everyone equally under the law. It's always good to remember that these are ideals, not always the reality of the world we live in. Equal protection forces a state to govern impartially, not draw distinctions between individuals solely on differences that are irrelevant to legitimate governmental objectives. An example of a legitimate governmental objective might be the idea that children can't sign contracts. It is okay legally to treat children differently from adults. It is important to remember that equal treatment and equal protection are no guarantee of equal outcomes. These principles are outlined in the 5th and 14th Amendments. Popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is sovereignty, meaning rule, by the populace, meaning the people. Popular sovereignty was asserted as a founding principle of the United States of America. The Declaration of Independence from 1776 asserts that legitimate government derives their just powers from the consent of the governed. The United States Constitution preamble says, "We, the people of the United States, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." Popular sovereignty was further expressed in Article 7. Natural rights, sometimes called inalienable rights, are rights that the framers believed all people are born with and can never be given up. The founders argued that the government's central purpose should be to protect and uphold these rights. John Locke, who we've already discussed, described natural rights as the rights to one's own life, liberty, and property. His work inspired Thomas Jefferson, the main author of the Declaration of Independence, who described inalienable rights as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Natural law is a system of law based on a close observation of human nature and based on values intrinsic to human nature. This is the idea that there are some things that all human beings believe are wrong. Virtually all humans believe that murder is wrong. They may vary widely in what they consider murder to be, but there is always someone who it's wrong to kill. Federalism. Federalism is the word used to describe the Constitution's system of dividing political power between the national government and the states. How much power should the states have, and how much power should the federal government have? The Founding Fathers wanted limited powers. The idea of limiting federal power is seen in the 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Individual liberty. Individual liberty covers the ideas of political and religious liberty. Religious liberty is enshrined in the text of our Constitution and in numerous federal statutes. It encompasses the right of all Americans to exercise their religion freely without being coerced to join an established church or to satisfy a religious test as a qualification for public office. Political liberty is the right of individuals to participate in government by voting and by holding public office. It is also the freedom to join any political party or no party as one sees fit. Congress attempted to ban the Communist Party in 1954, but the law was mostly repealed or declared unconstitutional. History and contemporary practice, government systems. There are several terms for kinds of governmental systems that you may need to understand in order to pass the Florida Civics Literacy exam. Remember that these are very brief definitions and you may need to do further study for your own understanding. Autocracy. An autocracy is a country, state, or society governed by one person with absolute power. Monarchies can be autocracies and so can dictatorships, but not all monarchies are autocracies and not all autocracies are monarchies. A democracy is control of an organization or group by the majority of its members. A monarchy is a form of government featuring rule by one person who passes the power of ruling by heredity. Once again, not all monarchies are autocracies. For example, the United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy. The monarch does not have absolute power, but there is a hereditary rule. An oligarchy is a small group of people who have control over a country, organization, or institution. A republic is a state, a government, in which supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives. So the difference between a democracy and a republic is the idea of elected representatives. A theocracy is a system of government based on God or gods. History and contemporary practice, economic systems. Just like there are many types of governments, there are several types of economies that you may need to understand. The first is capitalism, an economic and political system in which the country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit. Socialism, collective ownership by the populace, and administration and the means of production and distribution of goods. Communism, most property and economic resources are controlled by the state, meaning the government. Mixed market, a system that combines aspects of both capitalism and socialism. A mixed economic system protects private property and allows a level of economic freedom in the use of capital, but also allows for governments to interfere in economic activities to achieve social aims. Republicanism and representative democratic government. We are not talking about republicanism and democracy as the political parties here. These are small r republicanism and small d democracy. The Constitution guarantees a Republican representative form of government for each state. In our republic, we vote for representatives, they make the laws, and even help with the approval of judges. Direct democracy or pure democracy is a form of democracy in which the electorate decides on policy initiatives without elected representatives as proxies. The origins of our ideas of democracy come from Greece, and Rome gave us the foundations of republicanism. The founders did not want a pure democratic form of government because of human nature. Alexander Hamilton commented in Federalist 6 that men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. Constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is the doctrine that a government's authority is determined by a body of laws or a constitution. The Constitution is the law of the land. The Florida Civics Literacy exam wants you to understand some of the philosophical and practical foundations for the Constitution. The first is what they call the Judeo-Christian tradition. Most of the founders were some form of Christian or believed vaguely in an Abrahamic God. Republicanism, a government in which supreme power resides in a body of citizens entitled to vote and is exercised by elected officers and representatives responsible for them and governing according to law. Another influence on the Constitution was the European Enlightenment, the period of rigorous scientific, political, and philosophical discourse that characterized European society from the late 17th century to the ending of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815. John Locke and Montesquieu were both Enlightenment thinkers. Majority rule and minority rights. In a democracy, majority rule is the idea that the group with the most members has the most political power in a country and can make binding decisions. Minority rights are protected rights that are enjoyed by everyone, even those not considered part of the majority. The founders disliked both direct democracy and tyranny. Madison even spoke of the tyranny of the majority. Madison also believed a large republic could help avoid factionalism or rule by factions. So when you think about this, think about the fact that if 100 people are in a room and 51 of them believe something, they could repress the other 49. That is why government is set up to protect minority rights while allowing for the majority to have a hand in making decisions. The Bill of Rights and protections of civil rights and liberties. The Bill of Rights limits the power of government. The Bill of Rights is more fully discussed in video 2, the Constitution. But these rights and liberties guaranteed under the Bill of Rights may be limited as well. You cannot say whatever you want whenever you want without consequences. Civil liberties protects people from undue government interference or action. Civil rights protect people from discrimination. Elections. We are guaranteed free, fair, and secure elections. There are several things about voting in elections that you kind of need to understand for the Florida Civics Literacy exam. One of those things is what affects voter turnout. There are several factors that affect voter turnout. The first is electoral competitiveness. Is the incumbent contested, and is the race a close one? The next is candidate influence. How charismatic are the candidates? Can they get people excited? The next is election type. Presidential races have the highest turnout, followed by federal legislative races or gubernatorial races. Next is changes in voting law. Laws that make it easier or more difficult to vote will affect how many people vote. Closing polling places or limiting early voting may reduce voter turnout. And finally, you have demographics and social issues. Ballot measures or major issues that are being debated may bring out more voters who care about these issues. For an example, a proposed amendment legalizing marijuana use might be expected to bring out more young voters. There have been many attempts throughout our history, both legislatively and at the ground level, to both increase and decrease voter turnout. Higher voter turnout is usually dangerous to the status quo, and those in power often want to make it more difficult for those with less power to vote. So some attempts to encourage voter turnout have been voter registration drives, get out the vote campaigns, suffrage, civil rights, other social movements. The 15th Amendment, which allowed all male citizens, race, color, previous servitude excluded, to vote. The 19th Amendment, which allowed women to vote, and the 26th Amendment, which lowered the voting age to 18. Some actions that have been done and passed to discourage voting are the Jim Crow laws in the South, literacy test, poll taxes, all-white primaries, for example, and some more modern efforts such as voter ID laws, illegal and incorrect voter purges, limitations on methods of voting, such as less vote by mail, closing and consolidating precincts, and limiting get out the vote movements. How do elections work? First, you need to understand that elections are locally controlled. There are federal laws in place to protect some voting rights, but how, when, and where voting takes place is often very local in its control. Parties nominate candidates. Primaries are run by the parties. Some states have open primaries where any registered voter can vote. Other states have closed primaries where only those registered for that party can vote. Florida has closed primaries. Only Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. Only Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary. The Electoral College. The Electoral College is a group of presidential electors required by the Constitution to form every 4 years for the sole purpose of appointing the president and vice president. When we vote in presidential elections, we are not voting directly for the president. We are voting for that state of electors who will be in the Electoral College. Some states are all or nothing. All of the electoral votes go to the same candidate. Florida is an all or nothing state. If 51% of the people in Florida vote Republican, all of the electors in the Electoral College must vote for the Republican candidate. Other states are proportional. Electors are doled out by percentage of votes. In that state, if 51% of the people voted for the Republican candidate, 51% of the electors would vote for the Republican candidate, and 49% would vote for the Democratic candidate, or however they were proportioned. This this is the plea I always give when we give this presentation. Please vote. If you are over 18 and you are an American citizen, it is so important that you exercise your right to vote and have your voice heard. Thank you for watching this video on the principles and practices of democracy and how they apply to your life. For more information on the Florida Civics Literacy Exam, you can visit tcc.fl.edu. Click on Resources, click on Learning Commons, click on Testing Resources, and there you'll see Florida Civics Literacy Exam. Or you can visit the Learning Commons in person. We hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.